Even during a pandemic, all real estate is local, but how does that change regionally? We're on location with Michael Goldman, 2 blocks away from the White House, and welcome to the Language of Business.
Thanks for having me, Greg.
Michael, we first spoke with you in the height of the pandemic. What are your thoughts now on the current residential and commercial real estate environments?
Yes, I think in our market specifically, it's been amazing to watch people's mindsets over the last 14 months. I think that first we all went into shock. How are we going to be able to be away from our office, and are we going to be able to function? And eventually, once people realized we could function and we could operate and we could produce, it now became the thought of, do we go back to the office? How do we go back to the office functioning at the highest level possible? And so it's been very interesting to watch and be a part of those conversations with executives. But it has been a roller coaster 14-month period for us.
And are you on the top of the roller coaster or the bottom of the roller coaster now?
It's a really good question. We're still in the middle of the ride. I think that it is going to be a significant amount of time before people actually get into what we're calling the new normal or the new working normal. But I don't think we know what the permanent solution looks like quite yet.
So let's unpack the temporary solution. Are you all back in your office?
We pride ourselves on being a thought leader in the commercial real estate marketplace here in Washington. We came back to the office in full last July with some very strict protocols on operational procedures and how we were going to interact with one another. But we felt as a company that we needed to lead the charge for our clients. And I think we saw a dramatic increase in productivity being back together.
So is it fair to say that it's business as normal for MGA?
Well, I think that our business is being concerned about other people's business. And so I don't think that it's business as normal. I think it's business, 7 days a week. The hours that we are working as advisors and consultants to our clients have extended, whether it was 8 to 6, it's now 7 to 9. I mean, our clients need us now more than ever. So for us, it's just putting our heads down and trying to provide as much advice and guidance to our clients who need us.
Do you think it's a buyer's or seller's market on the residential side right now?
It's a seller's market all day long. I think that it's very much dependent on the price point, how much of a seller's market. So, I was speaking to a client of mine that was purchasing a house, and they were one of 17 offers. I mean, that's an unbelievable.
It's crazy. It's unbelievably crazy. Yeah.
It's crazy. I mean, the idea that you're 1 or 2 or 3, fine, but 17, like, for me, let's just, look at something else, quite frankly.
You said commercials in the freezer. Is it a deep freeze or is it beginning to thaw?
I think we're thawing. I think we're going into the fridge, as I mentioned. I think that look, there is a desire for folks to be back to normal and have the city operate normally. The activity, I will tell you, I think that if you look at the amount of cars or you look at the amount of people on our public transportation over the last 90 days, it's increased exponentially. So I think those are the signs that I look for. How many parking tickets are being handed out? I know it sounds crazy, but like when you see the parking ticket folks handing out tickets for the first time in my entire life, I get excited, right?
Is it a buyer's or seller's market on the commercial side?
It's a buyer's or a tenant's or an occupier's market, right? Developers are looking at deals and saying, I don't want to be the landlord with antiquated HVAC systems, the landlord with vacant space for the next 3 or 4 years. So the question is, what can I do to not be that landlord or that developer? And I think that the incentives, the concession packages that tenants are receiving in our market has reached unprecedented levels. I think that part of that is understanding the occupier base and the tenant base here in Washington, in contrast to other markets. I mean, Boston, for the last few years, was one of the hottest markets in the country, and even in North America, along with Toronto. But understanding that DC is always and will always be probably the most sustainable and insulated market based upon the nonprofit and trade association world, based upon the government contractors, and again, its proximity to capital.
Michael, thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Greg.
Michael Goldman, president of MGA, 2 blocks from the White House.
Are you a problem solver? Do you see the big picture and the small details? Want to turn big data into big decisions? Take AI to the boardroom. Translate rocket science into the science of business. Build your career at digital speed with a Master of Science in Business Analytics. Be ready for careers like analytics consultant, data science, analytics strategist, data translator, BI analyst, technical business analyst. 10 months and you're in business analytics.
Some people have described the commercial real estate market as being in a freezer, while others have saying we are now in a deep thaw and everything is going to revert to normal. We're on location with Benjamin Smith, Managing Director of MGA in DC, and welcome to the Language of Business.
Thanks very much for having me, Greg. I'm really excited to be here.
So where are we? Are we thawing? Is it time to buy and get back to normal? Well, what the heck's going on?
So I think it is fair to say we are thawing. A lot of folks are dipping their feet back in the water, exploring what kind of the new normal will be when it comes to a commercial office. And I personally don't think that's going to be a 5-day-a-week type thing, 9 to 5. I think there is going to be some sort of hybrid approach to this, whether 3-4 days a week. I think that might be the definition of the new normal. But as far as the thaw in DC that I'd like to speak to, we are seeing more activity. We are seeing more folks back on public transportation. As summer's coming around, we're starting to thaw, and there's a little bit more optimism around here.
You say you're in the tenant rep business. What does that mean right now?
So what that means is our company exclusively represents tenants nationally as they look to lease, buy, sublease their office space. We're not a firm that goes out and represents big landlords on that side of the biz. So we are an exclusively tenant rep only firm. And as you can probably imagine, the optimism level was a little bit different last May. And I think you spoke with Mike about a year ago now. So things have changed a bit on that side.
Are you getting deals done for them or merely holding their hands these days?
Well, no, a little bit of both. And I would say the last year of my career has been probably the most rewarding in terms of advising our clients. And that's not to say advising them to do anything or take advantage of great economics at this point. It's really advising them on how they're going to utilize their space for the future. And if there's opportunities, we analyze them. Are deals getting done? Yes, the answer, they are. And as far as handholding is concerned, it's how we can help our clients approach getting back to work in as safe fashion as possible, making their employees feel safe, making sure their landlords are operating efficiently and welcoming them back. So that to me has been extremely rewarding. We always say we operate a lot more as a consulting firm than just purely a real estate brokerage firm.
Several months ago, landlords were worried about keeping tenants. Tenants were worried about even needing retail space. You yourself said we're thawing. Are landlords willing to give you whatever you want these days, or are things reverting to that theory of normalcy?
Well, that's an interesting question, Greg. And I would say that there's a couple different answers to that. But DC is such a protected market in that we do have the government. And if you look historically at big, cataclysmic type events, I look at 08 and 09, and we track how rental rates have evolved. I wouldn't say that landlords are quick to drop rental rates, but as far as concessions that we're seeing in the market, from a free rent to a tenant improvement allowance type dollar amount, they are hitting numbers that I haven't seen in my 11-year career. But I do think that will thaw out a bit as people come back to work. And a year ago, landlords were looking for every possible way to keep tenants and sign new deals. So I'm optimistic. I think this area as a whole has a lot of resilience in DC. And we're starting to see that here over the last sort of 90 days, I would say.
Is the fact that the Biden administration is in office having any effect on real estate in DC these days?
I don't think one administration over the other really changes folks who are taking more space or getting rid of their space that drastically. I think new organizations evolve out of different administrations, but I would say it usually evens itself out. And I was having this conversation with an associate in our office. One thing we do for clients is staff questionnaires about their, honestly, how do they feel about coming to work? Those types of questions. And if we looked back at our data from July 2020 until now, it has drastically changed. In July of 2020, May of 2020, everyone said, I'm going to work from home the rest of my life. This works. But as the months started to wind down, as we administer more vaccinations and folks have been at home with kids, with their spouses constantly, the workday just kept getting longer. And I think eventually that will get folks back. I hesitate to say 5 days a week, 9 to 5, but there will be that sort of 3-4 days a week type culture here in the next, call it 12 months. And to speak more to your question, I would say, my clients are more optimistic about getting back.
Benjamin, thank you very much.
Thanks, Greg.
Benjamin Smith, Managing Director of MGA in Washington, D.C.
DC is blown up in development.
One of, if not the healthiest market in the country.
Commercial real estate can be fun. It can be awesome. It can be game-changing for a company, and that's what we want to be a part of. We decided to create a model that didn't exist in the marketplace.
Our mission is to be a tenant-only advisory firm and to take clients through every single facet of the real estate process. Helping them from everything from a light bulb going out to a construction issue within their space. It's not an easy undertaking to think about moving a 100-person organization, a 200-person organization. If we can help these organizations build a space from scratch, it's really going to cater to employee retainment.
That's where we take a huge amount of pride in not just being the transaction-focused firm that's going to help you find your office space. We go into the strategic planning phase and the workplace strategy to figure out how you want to office, how we think you could do things better. You've got the older generations that want to be in the office working. You've got the younger generations that want to work wherever, whenever. Some people want collaboration and meeting space. Some people want to heads down focus. It's a really challenging process, but it's worked for all of our clients, and it's not a one-size-fits-all. And we're going to be there for the long haul.
How much can you push your landlord in the middle of a pandemic before he, she, or they begins pushing back? We're on location with John Conroy, who's the president of East Coast Realty, and welcome to the Language of Business.
Thanks for having me, Greg. Appreciate it. Great to be here.
Good to have you here. John, you do a lot of property rentals, primarily on the residential side. What trends are you seeing right now in terms of deals being done or deals being destroyed?
Right now, all the deals that are being done are value driven. And we were uniquely positioned because we do so much business in China and with the Chinese students that when the virus itself started to present itself there, we were taking kind of a longer view in terms of what that was going to do to our local market. And we kind of let that be the barometer.
So just to make sure we are all on the same page, you represent owners and primarily rent apartments, both to people who are local, national, coming to Boston, or international.
Yep, we're the welcome wagon. We represent a number of owners. Primarily, our business is kind of unique in our market because we work with a handful of the biggest owners. So we're talking about pretty large portfolios, 500, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 units. So really a big portion of the residential real estate rental market here in town.
Rents, are they staying the same, going up, or going down in terms of the upcoming September re-rental season?
When we look at a lease, we think about the term rent. So it's whatever it is per month. If it's $1,000 per month, the term is $12,000 a year. A lot of what we're seeing is that $1,000 staying the same, but the concessions, maybe you're only paying for 10 months on a 12-month lease. And that's kind of the prevailing way that most owners are continuing to attract renters.
Vacancy rates, are owners expecting to go higher than the traditional 10% vacancy rate per building?
You know, if you had asked me 4 months ago, I wouldn't have had a real clear sense, but I think there's a kind of a palpable optimism now. And I think we're finally at a point where there's a real strong sense of a return. And we can see that in the amount of deals that we're doing. Most people are not expecting to absorb all of the vacancy that was available, But I do think that there is more optimism that we're going to get closer to something that looks like normal.
And what about your commissions? Are you willing to take a reduction in commissions? Are the renters primarily paying them? Are landlords primarily paying them? Help our viewers and listeners understand what's happening with that aspect of your business.
We are now being paid by the owners pretty much exclusively. In often cases, there's a bonus involved. There's some sort of incentive to get one ownership group out in front of the market, and it's really dynamic. I don't think it's ever been, again, in the 20 plus years that I've been involved, this dynamic. It changes day to day. With the ownership groups that I'm closely involved in, we have conversations multiple times a week, where in previous years and historically, we might have a conversation once a month, a check-in. Hey, how's it going? Thanks for this. Now it's more, what's the activity? How many times we show a unit? Why isn't it renting? Is it too much? Is it not enough? We rent 4 or 5 units in a building over the course of a weekend. There's a dynamic adjustment that's made on Monday.
And talk to us about international students, with more and more universities mandating vaccinations for people to return in person to campuses in the fall. Are you predicting that more and more international students are finally going to return to the United States?
I sure hope so. I can see that there's a lot more people that are trying to get here. The demand is there. The hope is there. Really, the stumbling block, and it really began kind of pre-pandemic, specifically China, was trade and administrative issues that were exacerbated by the pandemic. So, I think that there's a pretty big backlog of visas that need to get issued, of people that are in line to get out, to come here to take advantage of all that we have to offer. So ideally, as soon as the administrative blocks are out, I think it's going to be very strong on that, because the demand is still there.
Now that you've survived a full year of this pandemic, looking forward, what is the single biggest thing that keeps you up at night about the future of East Coast Realty?
Wow, great question. Last March, when things really went awry, we dug in as a company and made a commitment to coming out of this successfully. We doubled all of our efforts. We were really aggressive in terms of cutting costs and seeing where we needed to reallocate all of our resources, human capital, and I'm optimistic.
John, thank you very much.
Thank you, Greg. Thanks for including me.
John Conroy, president of East Coast Realty here in Boston, Massachusetts.
Big choices after college, right? Grad school, maybe? Soar from your undergraduate major to a great career in business. Biomedical engineer to healthcare analyst. Health science to clinical systems analyst. Mechanical engineer to solutions engineer. Before you know it, you can have a master's degree in management studies. 9 months and you're in business.
COVID has changed the landscape of commercial real estate, whether downtown or in the burbs. The big question is whether those changes are temporary or permanent. We're on location with Chris Mern, who is a principal at District Real Estate Advisors, and welcome to the Language of Business.
Greg, thank you for having me. Look forward to our discussion.
So Massachusetts is currently leading the way positively in low COVID infection rates and, of course, vaccination rates. How is that affecting your business right now?
It's been a very obviously dynamic year in the retail real estate industry, which is what we focus on at District Real Estate. And we've seen over the past 2 to 3 months more activity, which meaning that retailers have started to look for more opportunities, more stores. It hasn't necessarily correlated to new deals, but with the low infection rates, we have seen more activity, which is positive for our landscape.
And when you say more activity, does that mean your phone is ringing more, or you're actually physically seeing more people go in and out of the retailer stores that you represent?
Great question. We represent both landlords and tenants. So tenants have actually started to tour more, looking for new locations, new stores. Additionally, we've seen sales start to pick up, especially for the food and beverage and fitness sectors, which have really been impacted over the past 14 months from the pandemic.
Regardless of whether your clients are the landlords or the tenants, is everyone optimistic about a recovery this summer?
For the most part, yes. And there's some sectors that face some other issues. Especially the food and beverage world. They're having a tougher time with employment and staffing. But overall, I think people are excited to get back to restaurants, back to the grocery stores. So overall, it's been positive.
Traditionally, urban locations have outpaced their suburban brethren. Do you think that we are going to revert to normal soon?
I'm very hopeful. We've seen more activity from an expansion standpoint in the suburbs over the past, say, 10 to 12 months. However, we're fortunate enough to see and do deals in different cities, whether that be Boston, New York, DC, Miami, Chicago. Boston's a city where there's not a lot of inventory in the local environment, and there's still very high demand. So, when we speak locally from a Boston perspective, I still think urban is going to rebound fairly quickly compared to, say, Manhattan, which is obviously a much denser, bigger city with more inventory.
Massachusetts is leading the way in terms of reduced infection rates and vaccinations. Do you think we will also be leading the way when it comes to commercial real estate recovery?
I do. I am very hopeful of that. And I think Boston will be a top contender for a number of reasons. One, if we look at the retail sector, there's not a lot of inventory and there continues to be high demand. Additionally, we're fairly insulated because of some of our local industries, including, biotech, academia, finance, technology. So if you look at all those things as an aggregate, I do think we'll be a top contender.
What changes in leasing terms have you seen?
Quite a few, actually. What we're seeing is a lot of tenants are looking for smaller space. Obviously, as e-commerce continues to, take a little bit away from the brick and mortar stores, we're seeing shorter lease terms. Typically a retail term, you'd see 5 or 10 years. Now we're seeing 2 to 3 years. And then you see some other new requirements. It could be curbside pickup or more drive-through requirements. You're also seeing tenants wanting to be more of a partner with the landlord and sharing, more of a percentage rent deal as opposed to a typical base term rent structure.
What keeps you up at night about district real estate advisors?
Just the industry as a whole, and you can go back probably 2 decades ever since, e-commerce has really impacted the brick and mortar side of the business, and retail continues to evolve, and it's just trying to stay on top of the most important trends. What you saw this year was a lot of retailers thrived throughout COVID, and that could have been a Target or a Walmart, Home Depot and Lowe's, but there were also quite a few bankruptcies and restructurings, and that was Brooks Brothers, J. Crew, a lot of apparel retailers, food and beverage retailers were really impacted, as well as fitness users. But you're seeing some other, types of tenants thrive, and it's usually those, the digitally savvy retailers. But it's really just trying to stay on top of the trends, and finding clients and building relationships that are going to be sustainable.
Chris, thank you very much.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate the time.
Chris Mern, a principal with District Real Estate Advisors, located here in Boston.
Support for The Language of Business is from Boston University Questrom School of Business. We're also available as a podcast on Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever you get podcasts. Thanks for watching.